everyone and welcome to our first tutorial video. Before we get started, this is just the slideshow for just a very few couple of pictures from Face It that I really enjoyed, just while I ramble on for a little bit and talk about what we're going to go through today in our tutorial. So pretty much you guys decided that you wanted to see a lot about rotations today, so that's what we're going to focus on, and specifically we're going to focus on a wrangle, or only we're going to focus on a wrangle. For today, we might make a part B about Miramar. We'll see how we go. It's very, very, very different. But we're going to cover a couple of things that I would consider. We've got some basic, some intermediate, and some advanced things, and hopefully that's what all my tutorials are going to provide everybody with. So a little bit of everything for everyone. Some things you may know, some things you may not, some things you may just not even think about or even thought about before. So hopefully everybody can take something from these tutorials today. If not, make sure you let me know on how I can improve. And that way we can make these tutorials really cool and awesome. So yeah, let's get right into it, I guess. So pretty much like with our rotations, we've got two main rotates that would that are the most common. So pretty much you have blind rotations and you have wrapping. Blind rotations are generally used when you're using different cues from the game that you're playing, whether they be visual, whether they be through hearing, whether they just be through the feel of the game, to help determine, to make a decision as to when best to blind rotate, pretty much. And I'm just going to go through an example of a blind rotate that my team did, and just talk you through that and some of the things that we were thinking about before we did it. That helps you to be successful at it. Same goes for wrapping. I'm going to give you an example from my team, just so at least I can talk about it and show you guys why we did the things that we did. Hopefully you guys can learn something from that as well. Wrapping is generally done when you're like on the edge of zone, or maybe even out of zone, and you get an unfavorable circle shift. That's generally when you wrap and you're looking at trying to move towards the most uncongested side of the map. So we'll see how we go here. And yeah, let's jump into this. We're using a couple of different things today to help us. We're going to use auto productions, and we're going to jump in game, and I'm going to give you also a little bit of a way to make sure that we keep our vehicles safe as well. So we're going to jump in game, and I'm going to show you some of that. Cool. So let's move on to auto productions. So we've jumped on over now onto auto productions here, guys, and we're going to work on, we're going to explain our first rotation type here. So we're going to work on blind rotates, and we're going to talk about one of our Face It Global Summit games. This circle ended up going towards military base, and pretty much we did a blind rotate based on all the things that we talked about in the previous parts of this video, using all our cues that we had available to us, and I'll talk about them and explain them, and then how we came up with the decision that we did as to what we could take inside the zone. So remember, if we are doing blind rotates, is to make sure that we can get the strongest positions that we can inside of every circle, and then trying to win the game from there. So if we don't do some of these things, sometimes we get caught out of the zone, we get gate kept and all those, yucky rubbish things. So I'll pretty much talk us through. So actually, before any of this happens, one thing to really note is that you've always got to understand what certain loot spots and their timings generally are to certain locations. So this is military base. Now, we knew that there wasn't a Novo team. Enter's Force normally looted Milta, but they did end up doing, like, they saw the zone, they just went like pretty much straight to Crossroads Novo sort of thing. So, oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, so they ended up doing that. But there's places in military base like Severna, Yasnaya, Pachinki is Team Liquid and 17 Gaming, so we knew that they were fighting. There's some aspects that you can do. South George, right? All these teams like on the west side we're probably not going to have to deal with. These teams are going to be too late to actually do anything. So yeah, so we'll press play here, and I'll sort of show you what I'm talking about. So we get into a position where we can get some cues on the bridge, so visual cues for this one. We see that it's clear. Start moving across, and we get some visual cues that the crossroads are taken. Now, this is another thing when it comes to blind rotating, is you sort of have to think about, okay, if something happens, will the other teams do something about it? So this actually has a southwest hard shift. And what we're thinking is are we going to be able to cross the bridge? Are Enter's Force going to go somewhere else? If you take a look at their position, they're almost smack bang inside of center zone 1. Now, when this zone pops, they do actually leave, and that's because they did the right thing. That's their job to do. So if you take a look at right here, right now, if I get this out, I'm actually going to cut out 4M for the purpose of this example. Boom. All right, cool. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'll count VSG as 7. So there's 7 teams now on the island as zones coming in. 4M are just about to cross, pretty much. So I think we get 8 onto the island before the circles pop. So there's only 8 teams inside of a phase 2 circle, which is very, very... That's actually better than normal in our region for how many teams are on military base. That's something to keep an eye out for. So 4AM make it across. Envy don't land. They actually go around the back. No, they end up coming up and around the front, I think. So they see this circle. Boom. All right, Enters Force immediately leave their position at Crossroads to take a stronger position inside the circle. So they may just pull up here. Yeah, they do. All right, cool, which gives us access to go across the bridge. So that's another thing when you're rotating. So from here to here, we don't have the best vision. So I don't even think we saw them leave. We're just like, I think they're gone. It's like, so these are some of the things that you can use when you're rotating. So using your cues like that, like, well, they were in the center, zone just popped. It's military base, means there's not that many people on the base. They should move off of this. If not, and they don't move off of this, I should be able to get past them and leapfrog them. Okay, so then take their strong spot that they should have gone to. So those are some things to think about. So we move up and across. We end up taking Crossroads here. And so that's just their spot. And what you'll see now is that we get a lot of teams coming. So when we crossed the bridge, we saw Envy in a boat over here. We knew Cloud9 were up at the... Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Sorry, guys. So we saw Cloud9 at these yellows up here. We know that 17 and Liquid were fighting in Pashinki. We knew Severny was going to, be late as per normal. And then what actually happens is we actually know Armory Gaming are over here as well, which is the Milter farm team. So actually, I think they're just the farm teams because they actually have an engagement with Envy here. So, alright, zones coming in. So we know that Cloud9 are on this side of the map. We know that Armory Gaming and Envy are over here. We still know that Liquid and 17 are going to make their way in. We know Severny's probably also pretty late as well. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams that we know the positions of. That leaves us with, what's that? Maths is hard. 11 teams somewhere, no, 9 teams, sorry. Somewhere else inside the map. So what you can see now is that the zone pops. And it goes southwest again. Like, so hard. I couldn't believe this game. It was ridiculous. Alright. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. And so pretty much when this zone pops, we almost think about the exact same way. Who was in the center? So this is a Freak of Freaks. We got Aerowolf. We got Enters Force. Those are pretty much the center of that one. Now, with a hard shift like this, they're more than likely to move somewhere else. So if you can see, Aerowolf 1 are on the bunkers here. That is an extremely weak spot to be in, like, this early in the game, especially if it's on the edge. There's literally no benefit to it. So we actually decide that is going to be our rotation path. So we actually jump out and onto here, because in military base, you've got so many places to crash that are in the center here. And with only, 9 teams potentially in front of us. So one of the ones that we didn't really know about was NIP. Like, they weren't really going to get in front of us. These guys were up here. They were probably going to have a hard time of getting down before us. So that's... Now we know that there's 10 teams that we are in front of. There's 6. Somewhere in this area, there's 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 teams. There you go. That are going to be in front of us in some way, shape, or form. But we know the bunkers are going to be clear. We choose that as our rotation path, and we send it on a blind rotate. So we're just looking for something that's going to be free in military base, because we are sure that something, with 6 teams inside the circle, something in military base is going to be clear. Boom, it's actually one of the first things we spot, and it's ATC. So Air Traffic Control Tower, and we actually do a little bit of a split. Have a look at where we came from. We were in Crossroads, and we got into a pretty strong incentive position based off that information that we had. So, we did end up getting shifted off of and had a pretty rubbish game, but pretty much that's the idea, guys, is that using all those cues and figuring out how many teams are on which side and why they're on that side can determine whether or not you're going to do a blind rotate or not. Is it safe enough to do it? That's the questions you have to ask yourself, and in this circumstance, it was. So, yep, follow those steps and you should be sweet. So we're going to move on to our wrapping next, and I'm going to jump into a different game very quickly. Okay, you guys, so now we've jumped on over to our different game, again from the Face It Global Summit, but this time we're focusing on a different type of rotation. This is wrapping, okay, and it sort of follows the same principle wrapping, I guess, that you sort of want to look for those cues that are going to help you determine if this is the right play or not. I'm going to show you some of the cues that we used in doing this rotate. So as you can see, we're a Far Eastern team, so that one that we just used isn't really applicable where, you know, we're actually going to be the last team in, and we actually do end up only getting in a really not so great spot on the edge, which forces us to wrap rather than go straight in. Okay, so I'll speed this up a little bit more, guys. So we actually end up taking this area here, the pancake compound. Zone's coming in. We know that people have moved up over towards here because we actually scouted that as we arrived. We made sure that was taken. We saw the cars at this compound here. I don't know why they parked out front, but we saw vehicles of that one there. That's pretty much the only information we have. So unfortunately for us, we had a lot less information than the example I just showed before. There's things popping up in the kill feed. We don't know where they are, though. We can't really have a guess that, exactly where they're going to be when we're this far away. So we decided to do a wrap when this zone pops, and I'll explain why we decided to go the way we did. I'll speed this up just a little bit, and I'll get my drawing ready. Alright, cool. So zone popped, and it's not necessarily like a hard west shift, but it's like, you know, it puts us outside of the circle. Now, we knew that this compound was taken, pretty confident they were going to move up to Dogtail. They did actually move up into Dogtail. So we decided to go for a little bit of a wrap here. Now, the reason being is that the military-based team and the Primos team should almost, we actually thought this was one of them, so we were actually a little bit out on our things, but I'll show you an example soon. But they should be almost the only ones on the south side. Now, the reason is that, wait, what? I'm all right. I'm connected. It is that on the north side of the coast and getting to the coast, so nobody's really going to boat on this one. But so if they're not going to boat, they've got this big little congestion period where it's very hard to get a run down the coast going without actually getting blown up or killed. So we think that the coast is going to be relatively clear. So we make a rotation path going through the forest and making sure that we can get into this section over here. And we think that that's going to be best case scenario for us. We didn't know this was clear, so it's very hard to get that information when you don't have control. That's a risky blind rotate. So we decided to wrap the zone. And what I'll show you guys in a second. So we get to our spot, we get in front of OPR, the military-based team, which is a huge plus for us. Boom, I'm going to pause it right here. Okay, so this is after our wrap is finished. It's a bit generous. I gave it a little bit generously. There is 3 teams on the southern portion of this circle, and have a look at this. So using the knowledge of the map here, we knew that the north side was going to be a lot more congested than the south side, just plain and simple because of we were going to be the last team in towards this east side here. We knew that most of the teams that were going to come were either going to be the Primos team that probably, well, they got fed, so they actually went into the center, which is AHQ. Cool. And then you also have the teams that from military base, Milta, maybe Milta Power and us that could potentially be on the south side. Most of the other teams just went in on the east, like Pashink, so you see 17 Gaming there and stuff. So that's just knowledge from where we loot compared to where everybody else loots, what side's going to be most congested or not. So that is why we decided to wrap that direction. It worked out in our favor really heavily. So we avoided all this conflict that is just a little bit all over the shop, and we've put ourselves on the least congested side, which is the goal of wrapping. So now we're inside the circle. Yes, we're sort of being gatekept by these 2 teams, but now we have options. Yeah, so this became free, but it's like you cannot, with the information gathered, it's not necessarily ideal for you to just jump up and just be like, oh, eventually they'll move. They might just gatekeep you if they see that you're waiting. So it's better to take matters into your own hands and do that wrap there. So those are the cues that we took. You can use similar ones, and that's going to help you in making a decision if you should do a rotate via wrapping into the zone. So those are our 2 types of wrapping. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to boot up PUBG, and we're going to jump into a game from yesterday, because I don't have these games obviously on my PUBG account. I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of some compounds and how to keep vehicles safe, because as we know, rotations are only really successful with the use of vehicles, and lots of vehicles if you can as well. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things to think about when trying to keep your vehicle safe, as I've seen a lot of people sort of park their vehicles and be not so sure about, hey, is this a safe spot to park it, is this not, and just give you guys a couple of tips on that. So we'll jump on into the game now. Alright guys, so we've just booted up PUBG here. I'm gonna go through a couple examples of some compounds and just some ideas. So when I do all these examples, guys, it's just using the same principles and applying it in game here. So just jumped into a replay. We're gonna talk about this compound. This is just the one that I loot, so it's easier on the replay. So like so you see me on the mini map down the bottom right there, but it's just so that I can show you guys as best as I can and just explain certain aspects of keeping your vehicles safe, because I see a lot of new players or inexperienced players losing vehicles early, and that literally affects them for the rest of the game. It's so vital, so important to make sure that you guys can keep your vehicles safe. But yeah. So tip number one, if you have a bike, again, a lot of these things might seem simple to some, but maybe not to others. So it's just important for me to cover as much as I can. So if you have a vehicle, making sure that you put your bikes inside is it's quite simple to do. It can be a bit fiddly, but I mean, it's so important. Just chucking your bikes inside of the houses that you're staying at is a really short way to really keep at least those vehicles alive. For this compound in particular, for any in particular, what you need to do is, again, using some cues to help identify what is a threat and what is not, is going to determine where you park your vehicles or not. So I'm just going to give you some examples of, if people are there, if the circle's like this, and then we'll go from there. So pretty much in a compound like this, it's quite open, so it's very hard to keep all 4 vehicles alive. There's a little nook and cranny here where it's quite like tucked away, but it's very hard to fit 4 UAZs or whatnot in here without losing any tires. So pretty much for a compound like this, you need to look at the surrounding areas. So you have this area here, like the prison defies have very good line of sight on that compound. You even have this hill over here that has quite good line of sight. But what you can do is, if it is the early phases, they're not always taken. If it is a phase 1, phase 2 or whatnot, it's your job and responsibility to make sure you know what your threats are. So if there's nobody on the prison defies, then you can look at making sure that if you're trying to hide a lot of vehicles, you can put them in places that are potentially open there, because there are people there. You can put it here and just be like, look, I'll keep an eye on prison defies. If somebody rocks up, I'll try and hide it somewhere else. So those are things that you need to be really aware of, is that making sure you're staying next to your vehicle, because as soon as it does become under threat, you need to move it. And just putting it in the place that is least open to as least amount of angles as possible is the goal. Okay, so doing stuff like that. Another little advanced technique that I don't see very often is, if you're in a compound such as this and there really aren't too many places. Actually, I'll use the yellows here as an example. These yellows are sometimes, maybe in phase 3, phase 4, quite strong and defensible. They're not really open to too many things, but they do have good line of sight onto places where fights might be occurring, or especially rotations. So you can get a lot of kills from here. So it's not a bad little compound at all. But you do generally lose vehicles. So if you've got yourselves in a position where you may be on the edge, or you're not quite happy with your position, you might want to move later, so you need your vehicles still, but you found yourself here at these yellows because that was all that was available. One of the really good tactics to do is to put cars up against each other. So sacrificing one vehicle to keep 2 alive might be the way to go. Looking at it. So what you can do is you can look at putting vehicles, say, up against your natural terrain here, like here. So it's very rare that people are going to play there because they're going to get shot at by everybody. So you can put them here. You are open and exposed to behind you though. So what you can do is put one vehicle sideways here and maybe place 2 vertically this direction. And what that's going to try and do is give those other 2 vehicles a chance to survive, while you might leave one behind. It may not get shot at, that other one, but there is a little bit of an aspect there where you're keeping some vehicles alive at least, rather than just putting one there, one there, one there, and then maybe one in the center over here. It doesn't make, and then you lose all 4. So that's another thing that I'd like to see some people do, especially with you, as this is quite easy. You might put one up against the wall here, and then you have the other one on this side, and then it's really tricky to shoot out the tires because of the hitbox of the tires. So that's another really viable tactic in keeping your vehicles alive. So yeah, that's about it for the tips and tricks on keeping vehicles alive. It really does come down to the compound you're in and what sort of situation you've put yourselves in. But it is so crucial that you keep an eye, especially in phase 1s, 2s, and 3s, when you do know that you're probably going to have to move in a vehicle if you're going to survive that next zone. You don't want to be stranded left on foot that early, because then you're in a lot of trouble if you don't get fed circle. So yeah, so best of luck. That's my tutorial finished for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you learned some things from it. If you have any questions or suggestions or anything like that, feel free to DM me on Twitter or on Discord, or just leave a a comment in the video. But yeah, so we'll try and do a Miramar one up for maybe next week. That way you guys can sort of see how that is. That one's a little bit trickier, but yeah, that's a wrangle covered, and hopefully you guys can implement some of the things that we talked about today into your game. Sweet, I'll catch you guys later. Yeah, hope you enjoyed.